Oh, wow. You're actually wearing your hair down tonight.
Yeah, because I finally decided that I love my hair. I figured out the solution for my morning frizz, midday poof, and even next day bedhead. It's Frizz E Secret Weapon Touch-Up Cream by John Frieda.
Well, you and your hair look flawless.
Flawless and touchable. Feel.
Oh.
See? It's soft, smooth ends, no flyaways, shiny.
Well, I clearly need to get some because your hair looks amazing.
Frizz E Secret Weapon, only from John Frieda.
Blog Talk Radio.
There's been an awakening. Have you felt it? You are listening to Dark Matter Radio with your host, Ronnie McLean. You are listening to a special edition of Dark Matter Radio with your host, Ronnie McLean. Tonight, you will find that power is knowledge, and the knowledge you gain is freedom. And we're going to test the far out reaches of your mind. We're going to test everything that you believe in. You're going to have an awakening. Tonight, on Dark Matter Radio, with your host, Ronnie McLean. Coming through your mind. Coming through your heart. Coming through your soul. Coming through your life. Good morning to some parts, no matter what time zone that you might be at. Tonight, we're going to be talking about what's going on at the Mexican border. Strange times indeed. What's going on in the Mexican border? And why is the media not saying anything about it? This is indeed strange times. So tonight on Dark Matter Radio, hundreds of Africans, asylum seekers have flooded the Mexican border and the Mexican cities with the U.S. in an effort to gain access to California and Texas and to obtain U.S. asylum. Many of these unvetted migrants are from the terror hotbed of Somalia and other parts of Africa, rather than having to hide amongst the way. The African migrants have been getting a special permit from the Mexicans and from Mexico that gives them a free pass to the Mexican border. What does this mean for the Indigenous Americans? Should we as a people be concerned? Or is it a good thing that they have come in the numbers more than any time since the days of slavery? So tonight on Dark Matter Radio, with your host, Ronnie McLean, we're going to get into this subject. We're also going to get into a little bit of Trump and how he might be handling things. And is this a situation as to where this is going to be a good thing for the Indigenous American? Hundreds of African asylum seekers have flooded the Mexican border. Cities with the United States and the efforts to get to California and Texas to obtain asylum. And again, many of those are unvetted migrants, and they are from what many are called a terror hotbed from Somalia. And then what's the kicker is that rather than having to hide along the way, like many do when they sneak into other countries, these African migrants have been getting a special permit from the Mexican government that gives them a free pass to the Mexican border. The influx of the asylum seekers from African countries who enter Mexico illegally have been building for several weeks, and hundreds of individuals continue to arrive, primarily to Mexicanily, to cross the Calexico border to California in order to seek asylum. So Mexican immigration authorities have been spotted ferrying these asylum seekers from shelters and plazas to the international bridge with the United States. So what is going on in Mexico? And it seems as though that the Mexican immigration authorities have largely kept this quiet about the wave of African migrants who have been entering Mexico through that country's border, southern border actually, and then making their way to the U.S. border to seek asylum. Some of these cities they seek include Calexico and San Diego, California, and El Paso, which is in Texas. So my thing is that we heard sometime last year and the year before, which is 2013, 2014, and 2015, where the Obama government was putting out commercials in El Salvador and Honduras, Belize, and other what you would call Central American countries, telling the parents to send their children to the United States. And if you remember, there were thousands of children that entered the United States illegally. And then as they entered into the United States illegally, they told the border guards not to pursue them, and they were taken to safe houses all around the country. Some were in California, some were in Minnesota, some were in Denver, I believe somewhere in Florida and New York, and it's kind of crazy about what is going on with all of these Africans coming into Brazil and coming into Central America and making their way through one of the most difficult countries to get any kind of immigration through, because Mexico has some of the strictest immigration laws on earth. Some of the strictest immigration laws on earth. So one has to be able to fathom the thought, and you have to go down this road. How much is the United States government influencing these other states to allow these immigrants to come in? And then the other question is, why? Why are they allowing these African immigrants, some of them are Haitian immigrants, posing as African immigrants, to get in across the border? Why are they doing this? This will be the largest African migration since slavery. So this has not just been going on just now, but all throughout 2016. Some of the first reports about these African immigrants came in January, as they were talking about the droves of African migrants amassed on the Mexican border awaiting U.S. asylum under secret Obama pact. And what would that pact be? Now, remember back in 2015, I believe it was, 2015, I believe it was in May, that the United States, Mexico, and Canada, I believe, met up there in Ontario, to talk about the Mexican, Canadian, and United States Pact of North America. And remember, there was a lot of talk about the embargo and all that other type stuff coming into fruition. So there's a lot of things that are transpiring that seems to be contrary to the best interest of the people of the United States and of the indigenous people of the United States as well. And that's a subject we'll get into just a few minutes. So there's a few things that I really want to go over and talk about in terms of what is actually happening in terms of the immigration here in the United States. And there are some very important aspects about that in terms of how we need to get into what exactly is happening. Some of the things we need to go over is how many unauthorized illegal immigrants are in the United States, and how are they affecting the workforce in the United States, and how many Mexicans, actual Mexicans, make up the immigration in the United States as well, because we have a lot of influx of them, and what 6 states account for almost 59% of all the unauthorized immigrants in the United States. And the fifth thing we're going to get into is the rising share of unauthorized immigrants have lived in the United States for how long. And we will talk about that and more right after these messages. This historical fact is brought to you by RMS Enterprises, where safety is the most important aspect of work. Black civilizations of ancient America. Mexico, Zai. The earliest people in Americas were people of the nomadic or Gramitic African race who entered the Americas perhaps as early as 100,000 years ago by way of the Bering Strait, and about 30,000 years ago in a worldwide maritime undertaking that included journeys from the then wet and lake-filled Sahara towards the Indian Ocean and the Pacific, and from West Africa across the Atlantic Ocean towards the Americas. According to Glenwyn Thesis, this ancient journeys occurred particularly about 75,000 years ago, creating what you have today, the original indigenous people of America. This historical moment, in fact, was brought to you by RMS Enterprises. So let's get back into that. 5 facts about illegal immigration in the United States. The number of unauthorized immigrants in the United States has stabilized in recent years, as what you want to be told, or as they're telling you from the main media, after decades of rapid growth. But the origin of countries of the unauthorized immigrants have shifted, with the number from Mexico declining since 2009, and the number elsewhere rising, according to the Pew Research Center. And I'm going to give you a few facts about the unauthorized immigration and population. So one of the things that I want you to understand, again, a lot of things here that we do here at Dark Matters is that we have to read through a lot of the lines, because a lot of these are coming from news sources that help to promote the global agenda. And the global agenda a lot of times isn't so much for us, and I say people here in the United States, whether you're white or you're an Indigenous American, or original Indigenous American, I should say. It is something that they do, and they do that quite fervently in terms of, trying to press upon your mind what is good for you and what isn't good for you. So I've done a lot of studying about the illegal immigration situation and how many actual illegal aliens are actually in the United States. But I'm going to give you some of the mainstream takes on it, and then I'm going to give you some numbers that I've come up with through other studies and other people's studies that I've done throughout the year. So they're saying that there was 11.1 million unauthorized immigrants in the United States in 2014, a total unchanged from 2009, which is kind of interesting that the number has unchanged since 2009. According to and accounting for 3.5% of the nation's population. That's pretty significant, being that the Indigenous American only account for 13.2% of the population. They account for 3.5% of the population. The number of unauthorized immigrants peaked in 2007 at 12.2 million, when this group was about 4% of the population. That is huge. And I have to tell you now that, you have to remember that when most of the people that were coming in at that time, or a lot of the people that were coming in at that time, were women who are having children that are being born on the United States soil. And even though that the mothers were illegal, their children became citizens, granting them pseudo-citizenship through their children and access to the treasury of the United States of America. So anytime that you have access to somebody's treasury, you are pulling the resources from the United States. So a lot of things that were happening with this illegal immigration situation. And a lot of these illegal immigrants were coming from Mexico, mainly from Mexico and other Central American states, but mainly from Mexico at that particular time. And remember, all of those illegal aliens were able or are able to classify themselves as Caucasians or whites, so on the United States Census. And as many of them, and most of them do, to this very day. So the population, from the vantage point that I sit at, is actually probably anywhere from double that amount. So from a lot of the different sources that I've been studying have the illegal population up to 22 to 25 million. And then when you begin to start accounting for the people that they bring across the border amongst themselves, it can even go as high as 30 million. Illegal aliens, plus the children that they have when they come here, who are all sucking resources out of the system. And I know that they say that they, a lot of them work. So we're going to get into that as well. So the U.S. the U.S. Civilian workforce, well, we'll get into that right now, includes 8 million unauthorized immigrants in 2014, with account for 5% of those who were working or who are unemployed and looking for work, according to the new Pew Research Center estimates. The number was unchanged from 2009. Interesting how all these numbers are unchanged, and down slightly to from 8.2 million in 2007. The share of the unauthorized immigrants in the civilization labor force was slightly down from 2009 to 2.5 million, and 2007, 2.4%. So that's 5.2% in 2009, and in 2007 it was 5.4%, compared with their 5% share of the civilian workforce overall unauthorized immigrants, and overrepresented in farming occupations of 26% and construction occupations of 15%. In all industries occupations they are outnumbered by U.S.-born workers. And now see how they throw that in there, how they're outnumbered. Now remember, during this time, we were heading into one of the worst recessions the United States has ever seen, and they had a supposed, by their count, unemployment rate of about 8%. I think it topped out about 9%. The actual numbers were running anywhere from 15 to 20% Americans out of work. And today, I believe there's almost 99 million people who are out of work or looking for work. in the United States today, which is quite a substantial number of people. Of the almost 400 million people that we have here in this country. So when you talk about the workforce and how they take away jobs and how they're encompassing on other work, and they say that that these Mexicans and other people are doing the work that nobody else would like to do. And again, that's another thing that they say when they're bringing all these illegals across the border, because they say that they need competent workforce. Well, there's a lot of people out there now who have depressed wages because of all these other wages what they're paying these illegal aliens, and they are illegal, and they're paying them dirt cheap wages, where the companies that they're working for can make a hell of a lot of money, so that when it comes back down to normal, which is one of the problems Trump is going to have, these wages are going to start going up, so that can be a living wage, and that's anywhere from 15 to 20 bucks. It's going to be quite difficult for the economy or for the job market to rebound in terms of that, because you're going to have to raise significant amount of prices, or somehow bring down the inflation, so that way the money will be worth exactly what the money is supposed to be worth, which is a lot more than what it is today. So when you begin to start talking about a lot of this stuff, you begin to start getting into a lot of different things that we as original Indigenous Americans must be able to consider when we're trying to formulate a structure of our own, and we have to begin to start incorporating a lot of these other people within that structure that are trying to take over a lot of our lands, because they are moving our people out of our neighborhoods, our communities, and out of our homes. So you have to think about that when you begin to start saying, okay, well, this is great because it's a certain type of people that are coming in, but these certain type of people have absolutely no feeling towards whatever you've been going through for the past almost 500 years since 1492. And as your lands have been taken away, raped from you, and everything else, now this is going to be something else that you have to contend with, because these people are not from your land, and they're not coming here to support you. So Mexicans make up almost 52% of the unauthorized immigrations in 2014. Through their numbers have been declining in recent years. So that they want to say. The only reason why they might want to say that the numbers are declining is because a lot of them are classifying themselves as Caucasians, whites, to bolster up the Caucasian race population here in the United States, which that race actually has been declining for almost about 20 years now. So when you start looking at that, it becomes very significant in terms of the power base that they were losing, and why it was significant for Trump to be able to win this election, and how significant it was for them to pull that all together. And if you notice, there were a lot more Caucasian Hispanics that had voted for Trump than they expected in this election. So there were 5.8 million Mexicans, unauthorized immigrants, living in the United States. I believe that number was twice, maybe even triple that, in the year, in that year, which was 2014. And then it was down from 6.4 million in 2009, according to the latest Pew Research Centers. Meanwhile, the number of unauthorized immigrants from other nations than Mexico grew by 325,000 since 2009 to an estimated 5.3 million in 2004. Populations went up. Most of unauthorized immigrants from Asia and Central America, and a number of ticketed up from those of the sub-Sahara Africa, increased the number of unauthorized immigrants from other countries, mostly offset the decline of the number of Mexicans. So understand something, that since the days of slavery, there has virtually been zero immigrations coming from Africa, right? A little bit more immigration was starting to increase after the 1960s, when they began to start getting past all the civil rights movements and stuff like that, they started allowing a little bit more Mexicans into the country, but nothing as to what we're seeing right now. So there's been virtually really very little immigration from any of the African countries here in the United States from what you would really consider immigration, like from Europe or any of the European or Asian countries. They were freely to come over, and there were virtually immigration that stopped from Cuba, from Haiti, and a lot of those countries over there that had actually very strongly carbonated and carbon skin tones, whether they're carbon light or carbon deep carbon skin tones. But anything with very deep carbon skin tones were not really allowed in the United States for quite some time. So it's interesting when you begin to start really looking at that and why they're choosing now to allow these people from Africa to come in. It's extremely interesting, especially that we know that we as original indigenous people have some of the oldest Y chromosomes on the face of the earth, which makes us different from every other humanoid on the face of the earth, which makes us extremely special in terms of our origin and where we actually really come from. So those people who don't really believe in the Africa scenario and believe in other things such as certain people may have been placed in certain parts of the earth rather than coming from Africa, lead some credence, because again, when I had that show about the original indigenous DNA and how it shifted the paradigm of evolution on the face of the earth and all people, we're still in that mode today and trying to figure out exactly where we are, and we have nothing to do with Neanderthals at all. So fourth, the 6 states account for 59% of all the unauthorized immigration. This is probably going to surprise you. And this account came in 2014. It's California, which you know that in California there's been a lot of displacement of original indigenous Americans in California. California is one of the great strongholds of the Californian tribes, which were extremely carbon based people. With their texture of skin being very carbonated, very, very deep carbonated in tone, and some of them being, copper colored, still in that carbon range, because that's exactly what we're made of. All these other races, they're made of sulfur-based biologics, and we are a carbon-based biologic. And if you don't believe me, all you just have to do is look it up and take a look and see exactly what we're about. So that word melanin really doesn't exist. Melanin is a construct that was made up by the Greeks almost more than 1,000 years ago, to be able to study the carbon that is within the skin of carbon people. And so that they were able to try to disseminate what was inside of their skin. And so melanin was to try to describe the carbon and the secretion of what comes out of it to create skin tone. And again, that also was very much explained in a lot of the different other programs that we had here on Dark Matter Radio. And so, it's extremely important for you to know your history, for those of you that do not. But getting back to this, but some of the states' population had changed since 2009, despite the stable trend of the national level. From 2009 to 2014, an unauthorized immigration population decreased in 7 states, so they say. Alabama, now they're including Alabama. Alabama was another strong carbon original indigenous nation, with a lot of nations that were in there. California. Georgia was another very strong carbonated original indigenous beings, people. Illinois was also a very strong carbon native people, and Kansas City, Nevada, and South Carolina. Notice where all these immigrations population centers are going, and all of them have original indigenous people in there that were strongholds before 1492. I mean, very strongholds and very strongholds all the way up until this day. So, in all of them, they're saying that the decline was due to the decrease in unauthorized immigrations from Mexico. In the states, in 6 states, the unauthorized immigration population rose over the same period of time. Listen to this. Louisiana, you know who lives there. Massachusetts, people don't realize, but that was a very strong carbonated indigenous population that was up there as well. New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Washington, and all of these, but Louisiana, the increase were due to growth in unauthorized immigration populations from the nations other than Mexico. And Louisiana, it was an increase in Mexican unauthorized immigration, illegal, that drove the overall increase in the number of illegal immigrants. So remember, anytime that you have anybody that's illegal coming into your state or to your scheme of reference, that means that there is a potential that they have to go somewhere, and that going somewhere means that you might be being moved out of your community, which many original indigenous people are. So a rising share of the unauthorized immigrants have lived in the United States, guess what, for at least 10 years, a decade. And this is number 5. About 2/3, 66% of the adults in 2014 had been in the United States for at least that long, compared with 41% in 2005. Now, they claim that it's a declining share of the unauthorized immigrants that have lived in the United States for less than 5 years, 14% of the adults in 2014 compared with 31% in 2005. In immigration, in 2014, unauthorized immigration adults lived in the U.S. For a median of 13.6 years, meaning that half had been in the country for at least that long. And only 7% of Mexican unauthorized immigrations have been in the United States for less than 5 years in 2014, compared to 22% of those of all other countries. So it's extremely important for us to gather our thoughts and know what this means for the original indigenous beings. So, and this is why I talk about, our politics. Right, you have the United States politics, or the American politics, the United States of American politics. The United States of America just had their election, and this is an election where you have they claim that you have some influence, but you really don't. You don't have really much influence on the policies or anything like that that are being exhibited or exuded out there, because as it was really brought out in the 60s, the 40s, the 50s, the 30s, the 10s, and so on, anytime that they have any kind of election, they come to you, ask you for your votes and this, that, and the other thing, and then they throw you by the wayside after the election is over, as they're doing right now. But Master Trump said that he's going to fix your communities and make sure that your slave dwellings are going to be very, very, very nice. And but that being said, what's going to happen with all of these Africans that are now massing by the hundreds, and even some reports say by the thousands that are influxing into the country of Mexico, gaining access to America through El Paso and California. So also, let us remember that the border states are Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, and California. These are all border states, and this is where Trump said that he's going to be building a large part of that fence now, or that wall, but parts of it's going to be a fence. And in my understanding, in my estimation, from what I see for our politics, that can't come soon enough, because I think that the immigration should really come to a halt when you're talking about original indigenous politics and what we might be able to influence through the country that we are redeveloping, and being able to negotiate with other countries to try to get ourselves back together again in terms of our economics, in terms of our population of education, in terms of our being able to own some industries and control our own probably space programs, underwater research programs, science programs, tech programs. All of these things are things that we need to be able to establish under our own authority, so that we as a people will be able to begin to start understanding the world through our eyes, and how we are able to deal with what we need to be able to deal with as a people of people. And that time is coming. That time is coming. So that's why when I talk about certain political things, I talk about it not as an American, but I talk about it or an American citizen, because we're not really state citizens of the United States. We're federal citizens of the United States, where everybody else is a state citizen, and you're not really a citizen at all, because you've been granted the rights, but no one has taken an oath of rights to become a citizen of the United States. But you have a birthright to being an American, being that you're born on American soil, as your forefathers were before 1492. And that were here before the Caucasians or the Europeans or any other nationality, by that fact, came over here as they were trying to develop the trade or cause war on us, as they did in 1492. So it's very important for us to be able to understand that and have an understanding. So at this time, I want to try to go to the lines, because it's a very important subject that we're talking about. And I just noticed now that we do have a caller from 570. Caller, you're on the line. If you're just listening and you want to make a comment as to the information that you're hearing right now, you can do so right now. How are you?
I'm good. I was actually just listening, but I'm enjoying the conversation so far. I think it is something that people need to talk about. I'm from Pennsylvania, so you don't hear too much about the border all the way up here, so it's good to listen to that.
Okay, well, I'm glad that you're on, and please listen along with everyone else that's listening as well. And I'm glad that you're here at Dark Matter Radio, and thank you for calling in. And yes, the border situation is an extremely important border, regardless of what nationality you are, in terms of if you're a Caucasian or an Indigenous American person, and original Indigenous American person, as I say. And for some reason, the main media, you don't hear anything at all about what's going on with the border right now. What brought me onto this was, again, I combed the YouTubes and all other kinds of things, and I seen a video that actually showed thousands of males from Africa that were crammed at the border waiting to try to get in. And he was showing this video. This video was about a good 15 minutes long, and he was very concerned. He was from Mexico, and he was very concerned and wondering why nobody is talking about the situation that's going on with the border. So when Donald Trump, during his election, was talking about the border situation, it really hit a note with a lot of people, but it didn't really hit a lot of note with original Indigenous American people, because they take more of a quote-unquote democratic view of the world, which is more of a globalist view of the world, where we operate with no borders. And the reason why they want you to have that kind of mentality is so that they can further disconnect you from the land upon which you have rightfully to own. So this is the reason why they want more mass immigration. And as you notice, that there is a lot of mass immigration that's going on in Europe, in France, in Germany, all across Europe. Britain is now has been overtaken by massive immigration over there as well, and they are shaking up the whole entire paradigm of this particular world that we're living in purposely, so then that way they can diffuse any kind of an uprising or any kind of a mentality that might be able to take place to wake the people up as we are waking up, and having an understanding about our place on this earth. So this is the reason why the border, and I'm having this show tonight about the border, is so very important. We need to understand that these illegal aliens, these illegal immigrants that are in our country, are not in our country for us or any good. And, you know, when I'm out there talking to a lot of people, regardless of whether they're in St. Louis or if they're in Detroit, people in California or New York, where I'm actually from, or even down in Florida, Baltimore, Colorado, a lot of people all across the country who are original Indigenous American people. And those in original Indigenous American people, I just want to back up in case anybody gets lost with that term, is anybody who is classified as an African American, which is a made-up name, a construct that was given to you back in the late 80s, early 90s by Jesse Jackson supporting and Clinton, who put it on the U.S. Census, naming you and trying to finish the war of 1492. Anyone who's considering themselves black, which I recommend that you get rid of that term black, because black is every connotation of evil and negativity, and any time that you call yourself that, you are denigrating yourself and putting a curse on yourself that is of dark nature. And then we get into that word dark. If you notice, I try not to use that word dark anymore, because dark is another connotation that has nothing to do with the beautiful self of carbon type people and the tones upon which they exist in. So don't call yourself dark. Don't call yourself black. Don't call yourself African American. African American actually means conquered people of America. So, and a lot of the other shows that I started in the very beginning, I detail that out very, very eloquently so that you can have an understanding of what your real name and why they're calling you what you are, and why our communities in the state that we're in now could never get better, because we're constantly always throwing out a curse on our own selves. So, you know, when I go out there and I say my black brother, I'm rarely calling him an evil, blotted out, bleached out person that has absolutely no significance on the face of this earth and has everything to do with evil. When I call myself, my skin is dark. When I say that, I'm calling myself something that is dark, that is wicked. That has every connotation of negativity that you can think of. So, you know, when we take our religious trainings, and again, you have to take that, and you talk about, you know, living in the soul, because remember, before we used to always be about the soul, but now it's about the spirit. But when you take that religious training, anything negative that comes out of your mouth directed either towards yourself or another person is a curse. So stop cursing yourself. Stop cursing your children. You say, why aren't my children getting better? How come my community isn't getting better? Because every time that something comes out of your mouth, it's of a cursing nature to you and the people upon which you're associated with, and it lowers your spiritual vibration, and it brings you into a constant state of fear. And when you're in a constant state of fear, you're unable to be able to produce and magnify your intentions into reality. So here at Dark Matter Radio, we have stopped completely using the words African American, black, and dark. Negro and negroid and all that other type of stuff. Again, it's another scientific word that was created by the Spanish and Europeans to describe who you are ethnically and whatever part of the world that you might be in. So this is the reason why we're talking about this. Also, understand the difference you are as an American, as an indigenous original American. Because the people are African and they're coming over, and I'm getting back to that subject again when I talk to people all around the place, they say this is a great thing that we have all these Africans flooding into the United States, and, it's going to do the white man. The white man's finally getting what he deserves and all this other type stuff. Again, another negative connotation, because when you are hell-bent on creating disruption in someone else's life, the only thing that's going to happen is that karma is going to come around 7 times fold and create disruption in your life. So we as a people need to begin to start understanding that we need to begin to start focusing on us. And when I say on us, on the original indigenous American, not on any other racial type or racial people, but on us. We need to begin to start, our intentions need to be start focusing on us and everything that we are, so then that way we are able to protect what we have in the land that have been given to us for thousands and maybe even hundreds of thousands of years, according to the DNA and the research that goes back, because our Y chromosome is 378,000 years older than any other DNA racial types on the face of the earth. So this is how important you are. So they're not trying to kill you because you're black, because black is a made-up construct. They get you to call yourself that so that way you can curse yourself and kill yourself. But they want to kill you because you're an original indigenous American, which means that you're original to this part of the earth. That's what's going on here. And the more that they can get you off of this side of the earth and get you to go back to a land that you don't belong in, the more that they can keep on bringing their other people over here to steal your land, to rape it, and to take all of its resources and to go on about their business and do what they do with everything else. Because remember, before they came over here in Europe, what they did to their own land, they completely and totally and utterly destroyed it, chopped down almost every single tree, messed up all their river systems and their laking systems, and overfished to a point as to where they were in virtual hell over there. And that's one of the reasons why they had the Black Plague. And remember, we as original indigenous Americans, the border is extremely important, because as they begin to start letting these people in, we're being displaced. And there's a big plan to displace us all if we do not rise up as I am promoting, not as just as Hebrews, not as just as Moors, and again, go back to some of the other programs that I have, and you can listen to all those programs that I had, and you can understand where a lot of these fractions actually really do come from, based in truth. And if anything that I'm putting out there that isn't truth, again, call me on it, and make sure that I'm corrected. And I've done a lot of studying. And I've spoken to quite a bit of people, and I have a great deal of resources, and research is basically what I do. So just remember that you are special, and I don't mean that you're just a special person, but you are of a special race of people. And for years, my grandmother used to tell me, she said, boy, she said, don't ever let nobody call you no nigger, because you have royalty in your blood. And she kept on talking about the blood, and I had absolutely no idea. And a lot of times what happens with a lot of the older generations, coming from the time before us, they were petrified and scared to talk about the truth about who and what they are and where they came from, because it only meant death. And but when you begin to start realizing what they went through and why they were keeping themselves silent, you begin to start understanding how deep this whole entire worldwide crusade to get rid of the original indigenous American off the face of this planet has become. And it's serious. And one of them is trying to penetrate through our borders. I mean, we have herds of African immigrants are being housed and sheltered in Mexican border towns such as Tijuana, while they await entry into the United States under what appears to be a secret accord between Obama administration, Mexico, and Central America countries that Africans transit on their journey north. A backlog of African migrants or overwhelming limited shelter space in Tijuana, Mexico. Officials blame the slow pace of the United States immigration authorities in San Avero port of entry gain only 50 asylums solicitations daily. So out of these thousands and thousands of immigrants, and when you go back and you pull down this podcast, I have pictures that will come up as you're listening to the show, and you can see how many of these immigrants are actually at the border. This is weird, and I say that this is this is strange times, because why would someone who feels that it's their president, Obama, allowing all of these things to happen? And again, like I said in the beginning of the show, remember how back a year ago when they had put out all those commercials down there in Central America, enticing the parents to bring their children or to allow their children to come up into the United States. By the tens of thousands they came up here. They came across the border. They ordered the border patrol not to bother them. In fact, they were ordered to help these children get to these safe houses, and then from these safe houses, they went to safe zones that were in Mexico, St. Louis, New York, Florida, Washington, D.C., state of Washington, Colorado. They were all over the country. So, and again, when you begin to start bringing these people in, as we as original indigenous people are trying to get ourselves together, which we are, they are taking the resources that we have for ourselves, for our children, and causing a great deficit, a further deficit in our country. And you have to say, why would Obama allow this to happen, and the Democrats and anyone else that's in political office allow this to happen, when you look at the state of the original indigenous people in America, which has the most horrible infant death rate. We have the highest incarceration rates. We always have the lowest unemployment rates of any demographics. When I say of any demographics, whether or not if you're a college graduate, non-college graduate, high school graduate, we always have the lowest of everything. Our medical situation is the worst of every demographic in the United States, and you know, when you start looking at our wage differences, again, we still have much lower wages than most of the other demographics in the United States. So when you begin to start looking at the border, what it means to us, and how they're letting these people come in, it's a travesty and it's devastating to our people, and it's just another thing that we have to fight. And you say, you know, how is it that they're allowing these people coming in here? Again, you know, there was another report that was out that, you know, at one point the original indigenous American people had a net worth of I think it was $900 billion. Now they're looking at us as being one of the most poorest races on the face of the earth. And when we become that state, because remember, the reason why they created the African American was so that we can use the resources or buy the resources of other people. And as a Jewish person that I talked to once said, he said, you know, he looks at the African American and their community as a great business opportunity, because we can come in there and use up all the resources and go back to our own homes and keep the resources for ourselves. He said the water runs through their fingers like money runs through their fingers like water. So going to have a little bit of a break here, and I want to have this break, and I'll be right back on the other side. This historical fact is brought to you by the United Front Line of newly reestablished combined Indigenous nations of North America. The Webster Dictionary of 1828, definition of an American. American Dictionary of the English Language. American. It's an adjective pertaining to America. American. It's a noun. A native of America. Originally applied to the original and aboriginals or carpet-colored races found here by the Europeans, but now apply to the descendants of Europeans born in America. The name American must always exalt the pride of patriotism. George Washington. And that was a historical fact brought to you by the United Front Line of newly reestablished combined Indigenous nations of North America. Want to take a ride? You're listening to Dark Matter Radio with your host, Ronnie McLean, on Blog Talk Radio. To reach Ronnie, log on to Blog Talk Radio, look up Dark Matter. You can reach Ronnie on Skype or through the number that is provided. Dark Matter Radio with your host, Ronnie McLean. Welcome back to Dark Matter Radio. Again, with your host, Ronnie McLean. We're talking tonight about what's going on at the border of Mexico. Strange times indeed. And as we move on, we have a few more minutes left to the show. I want to get into what we are doing and what's happening. And again, we had put out, when I say we, the United Front Line, Indigenous Nations of North America, has put out three resolutions to the United Nations back in September. And back in September, when those resolutions was going on, black people were getting killed or African Americans were getting killed. The original Indigenous American people were getting killed left and right. Since those went in, there hasn't been any original Indigenous beings killed by United States police forces anywhere in the country. From that up until this time, before this jet player got killed by somebody there. So on my next show, I'm going to get into what are the efforts that we're doing to try to help ourselves have more of a political stake for ourselves and a more political say-so, and what are the next steps that we should be taking as the United Front Line, Indigenous Nations of North America, whether or not if you're a Hebrew or Moor, a Christian, a Jew, or whatever you want to call yourself. It's important for us to be able to get on the same page. So, it's just we need to be able to talk and speak for ourselves, and that's what we're going to do, not only at the UN, but we're going to do that. We're going to do that anywhere that we are. So, yes, the United Front Line of Indigenous Nations of North America is something that is going to come to fruition. It's here now. So we're also going to be doing something that's going to be causing us to write. Well, we already wrote it, and it's coming out. Radio. independence of a nation. With your host, Ronnie McLean.
I'm just trying to make some music. I'm just trying to entertain.
Thank you for being here at Dark Matter Radio.
Some say that I'm insane.
Thank you for listening. We're going to be on more.
We might share the same culture, but we are not the same.
It's worth it.
You don't even know my story.
We're here to come.
Don't even know me.
We're going to.
Pages like a courtroom.
Thank you.
Crowd is
This
like
is Ronnie McLean, Dark Matter Radio.
so much bad minds around
Have a good
me.
night.
Sitting my
And everyone.